How I quit collecting records and put out a comic with the money I saved is a 6-page short from the graphic novel American Splendor No. 4. In the story we see how the author, Harvey Pekar, picked up a final record collecting habit in his teenage years, and how the habit continuously grew over time until it became an all-consuming obsession. The habit would eventually lead Pekar to rock bottom, as he hatches a plot to steal records from a radio station. The scheme thankfully failed to take off when the room he had hidden the records in had been locked before he could retrieve them. This event would be the breaking point that would allow Pekar to escape his obsession and put that energy into getting his graphic novel American Splendor off the ground instead. Despite being written in 1979, this story has a heavy dose of relatability. The obsession to collect and the fear of missing out are all too well known by myself and many of my peers. Since starting this diary, I too have begun to change my mentality when it comes to how I approach buying and playing video games. I no longer feel the need to buy everything, and the more games I do play, the more I come to see that there are some that are fine to miss out on or leave unfinished. There have been games I pushed on to completion when maybe I should have used the time on something else. As I get older and my time becomes more limited, I begin to understand and appreciate the art of leaving things unfinished. It is a mentality shift that has been aided by the time spent playing our first title. Starting where we left off last month, I was initially positive on CrisTales, but in the weeks that follow my feelings have become complicated. I will preface this by saying that a lot of love and passion clearly went into this game, and that when it comes to the basics and core game design there is something promising here, and I hope the studio is able to build upon that in their next game. As I dug deeper into CrisTales, the issues became all too apparent. The story runs out of momentum in the second half, stakes feel like they escalate too suddenly, and the plot jumps from mid-game to endgame too quickly. The world feels small and lacking in depth, and the boss battles become too narrowly designed as the player is expected to stick to very specific strategies if they wish to succeed. This boss design issue became especially bad near the endgame, with one boss almost making me drop CrisTales altogether. RPGs are often repetitive and loop reliant, which is why many need a strong narrative and solid world building to keep the player engaged. The moment the penny dropped for me is when I finally realised that playing this game was making me feel lethargic. The excitement had faded, and I was simply autopiloting my way through for the sake of seeing it out to the end. CrisTales displayed signs of being a strong 3-star title, but the issues with the latter half limit it to being 2 stars. I will still champion the battle system and dungeon design along with the visuals, but all its faults, CrisTales still did good work in the places where it mattered most. GetsuFumaDen, Undying Moon. I've been wanting to get my hands on this one for a while as it fits into my growing interest in games themed around historical or ancient Japan. Undying Moon is a bit of a looker and does the ukiyo-e aesthetic about as well as you could ask for. The combat is basic, but that's not a bad thing considering that this is a revival of an IP whose only other game was released for the Famicom in 1987. Gameplay-wise, it's faithful enough to the original while still feeling modern and refined. Undying Moon comes bundled with the original Famicom release, and having played both I can say that Undying Moon pays fair homage to the original, even if it is a departure that transforms GetsuFumaDen into a roguelite akin to Dead Cells. The wider consensus among roguelite fans is that there are better games out there, but something about GetsuFumaDen Undying Moon makes me very fond of it. Yes, this game is technically unfinished and abandoned. Yes, there was supposed to be more playable characters, levels and bosses, but taken as is I think the game still has plenty to offer as a challenging 2D action title. Its systems are basic but it is built on old school game design and it is comfortable with that fact. The various weapons all serve basic functions to suit different playstyles, even if they do not add a level heavy of dynamism to the game. I've put several hours into Undying Moon, and I'm more than happy to keep using the default katana for the time being. My playthrough of Undying Moon is still ongoing, but I am impressed with it. I enjoy the wide level variety and appreciate that the player is expected to work their way through a challenging early game before they are allowed to access the more creative areas. I will not go too in depth on the combat skills or soul system for now, but what I can say is that there is a perfectly competent and polished game here if you are willing to take it as it is. SUPERBEAT XOniC. One thing you may not know is that I was at one time a very avid Dance Dance Revolution player. I still love the game and wish I could play it more often, but sadly I am on a forced hiatus from the game right now. So I was a bit stuck on what to do when it came to rhythm games. My local arcades only carry ancient versions of DDR, and the good versions are all miles away from where I live. Beat Mania, Sound Vortex and Poppin' are all alternatives I'd love to try, but getting access to them is a bit of a challenge. You can probably imagine my excitement then when I discovered the existence of SUPERBEAT XOniC, a Korean-developed rhythm game originally released for the PlayStation Vita. I'm terrible at it right now, but it has done more than enough to scratch the itch that has been bothering me during my DDR hiatus. You best put some headphones on, as SUPERBEAT XOniC is unapologetically loud, colourful, and in your face with the audio-visual presentation. SUPERBEAT XOniC is a simple game where your D-pad and face buttons hit low, medium and high notes on their respective sides, while the control sticks are used for additional flick and hold notes. It has the feel of a Benami game, but without the strict judgment windows or harsh penalty systems. It is designed for consoles, so there's a bit more wiggle room and leeway here when it comes to song completion. That's not to say it is easy. There is still a challenge here for those who really want to see how far their skill, technique and timing can be stretched. It is still too early for me to give a true verdict on a game like this, but what I will say is that you might find it more intuitive to play on a PlayStation controller, as the stick layout for other platforms can feel a bit awkward and counterintuitive. Either way, I'm completely hooked right now, and can easily play it for hours on end without breaks. It's not often that a game can have that effect on me, so I'll be coming back to it often. Labyrinth of Refrain, Coven of Dusk. I've only put 2 hours into this, so I'll keep it brief. Visually, it is a Nippon-ichi game through and through, super cutesy anime aesthetics where everyone is super young and all the girls are incredibly busty or incredibly childlike. If you want to know what the plot is, I can't tell you because I skipped every cutscene. Coven of Dusk is a traditional dungeon crawler akin to Shining in the Darkness, which is no problem at all because I really like that game. I've become a bit tired of JRPGs, but there is a certain appeal to dungeon crawlers that makes me more prone to liking them. Typically, the average dungeon crawler will be more heavily designed around the gameplay loop. Navigation is a puzzle within itself, and enemy encounters tend to come more frequently. The early game has shown some promise. I'm happy with how I am able to build my own party from scratch to suit my own playstyle and preferences. And I do like that the game allows some degree of freedom as you delve deeper into the dungeon, even if that means occasionally plummeting into an area that you're not supposed to see until much later. It's not great seeing normal enemies one-shot your party, but I can't help but appreciate that such things are possible. I do want to come back to this at some point, but it's hindered by the sheer amount of titles it has to compete against, as my backlog also features the likes of Octopath Traveler, Super Mario RPG, Crisis Core Reunion, Star Ocean Second Story R, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 3, Tactics Ogre, Triangle Strategy, and many, many more. And that's just on the Switch. Don't even get me started on the 3DS. If I do persist with this one, then it will likely be a slow burner. Cytus Alpha is a game I found to be more intriguing than something I'd actually want to play. I wasn't sure what to think of it when I first learned about it, so I decided I would just need to try it out firsthand to see if I liked it. I didn't hate Cytus Alpha, but I didn't love it either. If you are playing it docked or with a controller, then just don't bother, as there is no point. All buttons can hit any note as long as it is timed correctly, which essentially just turns it into a glorified clicker game. The only real way to play Cytus Alpha is to remove it from your dock and play it on the touchscreen, as your inputs actually matter when playing on touch mode. Even so, it is too basic for my tastes. It feels like the kind of rhythm game you would see people playing on a phone. At face value, the game is shallow, and unless someone goes out of their way to convince me otherwise, I am not interested in playing it further. Man, I really do love arcades, but I do not love arcade spirits. I can appreciate what they had going on here by trying to make a heartwarming visual novel that plays homage to classic video games and arcade gaming culture. The people who made Arcade Spirits clearly did so with a lot of passion, but it has this funny juxtaposition going on where it is a visual novel that obsesses over the kind of games played by people who don't play visual novels. I love arcade games for many reasons, but in terms of game design, you could not be further away from the arcades than this. Visual novels and adventure games are genres which have their origins in choose-your-own-adventure books and classic computer gaming. From a design perspective, they are the antithesis of arcade game design. I will concede that this is a bit of a nitpick and more of an observation than a criticism of the game itself. Arcade Spirits is a very no-pressure, low-stakes story about bonding with a varied cast of characters such as your roommate who looks like a regular at the local geek retreat, the tech girl who repairs arcade machines, the elderly landlady, the foul-mouthed pro gamer, the DDR player, and so on. I played through the first chapter to get a feel for what the game is about. From what I can tell, the entire experience is text-based and you cannot play any of the games featured. Still, Arcade Spirits had enough buzz around it to warrant a sequel, so if you are into visual novels and really like stories about cozy friendships and socializing, then maybe this is the one for you. As for me, I think I'm going to go play some arcade games. Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist. This segment is going to be less about the full game and more about one specific feature. I loved sealed play mode. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a funny history with sealed play. For many years, sealed play as a concept simply did not exist. By design, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very insistent on players running cards which work well together in selective combos, making it difficult to design for drafting. However, that didn't stop Konami from experimenting with the concept and creating Battle Pack. Battle Pack would be a series of boosters designed explicitly for sealed and draft play, reprinting numerous cards that would fit well into a randomized format. In Legacy of the Duelist, the player has access to 3 real-world Battle Pack sets: Epic Dawn, War of the Giants, and War of the Giants Reinforcements. Each of these contain their own dedicated card pool designed for sealed play. As a game mode, it is very limited, yet I would argue that this humble mode is easily the best part of the entire package. Legacy of the Duelist is an incredibly bare-bones package. The campaign is threadbare, the card unlocking is an RNG nightmare, and the duel engine is not up to the task of playing modern Yu-Gi-Oh! At a reasonable speed. As a platform for sealed play, however, it is up to the task thanks to the incredibly basic and straightforward card pool. So why do I love this mode so much? Well, to put it simply, it strips Yu-Gi-Oh! Down to the bare basics and really drives in what the appeal of the game actually is. The card pool is well balanced with both powerhouse staples and utility pieces making up your decks. Under normal circumstances, it would be easy for a player to simply jam their deck with the most powerful cards available, but the random nature of drafting means this is out of the question. You can only play with the cards you are given. This opens the deck building process up to all kinds of creative strategies and combos. In this session alone, I managed a clean 5-0 sweep using 2 cards I would never use under normal circumstances. These 2 cards were Fighting Spirit, a spell card that powers up my monster for each monster my opponent controls, and Cursed Ornaments, a spell card that weakens my opponent's monsters for every monster they control. The beauty of this combo is that every time you destroy a monster equipped with Cursed Armaments, it activates an effect where you can then equip it to another monster the opponent controls. Using this combo, I was able to make it so that my opponent's monsters were always weakened to 0, while my monsters were supercharged to high values. Stumbling onto new combos such as these is an incredibly exciting feeling. I am not exaggerating when I say that Battle Pack duels have helped me become a more creative and knowledgeable Yu-Gi-Oh! Player overall, as I have come to appreciate the potential play value of otherwise obscure cards. Without sealed play mode, I would have been finished with Legacy of the Duelist years ago, but thanks to sealed play mode, I now feel like this is something I could play for years without ever getting bored of it. If you're considering trying out Yu-Gi-Oh! Through one of the video games, then I think Legacy of the Duelist is still worth picking up. Once you've completed the basic tutorials, you'll be able to jump into battle packs and will never need anything else to keep you engaged with it. I won't give a star rating to this game because of my own personal biases, but if you are ever looking to try it out, then this mode is worth buying it for. Super Monkey Ball, Banana Mania. I feel rather let down by this one. I'm not upset or angry, it's just Banana Mania doesn't really do it for me. I adore the original Super Monkey Ball and consider it a perfect video game, so it's a shame that Banana Mania, despite being a remake, manages to feel lesser in almost all areas of play. I do not enjoy the remixed OST as much as the original songs, and the SFX is doomed to feel inherently wrong to me as a fan of the original. The levels are still fine, having been copied almost one-to-one with the original games, but what good are the identical stages if the controls and physics fail to match it? It has been well documented at this point, but these are not the same physics as the original Monkey Ball games. The remake was developed in Unity, and rather than attempting to transfer 20-year-old assets to a new engine, the developers instead opted to rebuild the entire thing from the ground up. The original Monkey Ball games had tight and quick movement controls, especially when turning. The turning seems to have been lost in translation, and there are levels where you can definitely feel this difference. It may not sound like such a huge issue, but in a game like Super Monkey Ball, it is the difference maker between an excellent game and a merely acceptable one. Perhaps I am being too harsh on Banana Mania. It has made me reevaluate my feelings on Super Monkey Ball 2, however. I am not a fan of the speed switches or other gimmicks, but when played straight, Super Monkey Ball 2 still had many excellent levels which were a natural escalation of the original's design. I may have to pick up Super Monkey Ball 2 again at some point just to give it a second chance. What has bothered me the most about Banana Mania is how it feels like a wasted effort. The two games it was made to replace are still superior to it. It does beg the question of why Sega didn't just remaster the originals. Well, we know the answer. It's because all three recent Monkey Ball titles have been developed on the same engine to save time. I understand the reasoning, it's just a shame that this remake wasn't able to get it right where it mattered most. Advance Wars 1 and 2, Reboot Camp. If you have been keeping up with releases over the past few years, you probably have noticed the uptick in games having straight up remakes. I don't mean remasters, reboots, or even reimaginings, but straight up the same game built from the ground up in a different engine. These games sit in a weird spot on the video game preservation debate, as many remakes are designed to replace the original, or stand in for a lack of access to the original. You could argue that this is fine if due diligence is done to make sure the game is up to standard, but in my experience they rarely are. Banana Mania had issues with the physics, while other remakes have been held back by a myriad of other reasons. It's rare, but occasionally you do get a remake that is one-to-one, and even allows the player to change the visual style on the fly. That's the level of parity players dream of when they learn their favourite games are getting a remake. I bring up these points because Advance Wars Reboot Camp has many characteristics of a remake which unsuccessfully captures the look or feel of the original. There have been many complaints about the visuals, but I will give WayForward its due here for attempting to go with the toy box look seen in the Japanese Famicom Wars series. I can't put them down for attempting something so bold. My concerns about Reboot Camp are not easily quantifiable, but are more down to preference and personal taste. The game is still Advance Wars, same campaigns, same maps, same combat, same rules. Those aspects are retained, but there is much to be said about how presentation can affect our overall enjoyment of a video game. Reboot Camp lacks a rawness that was present in the original Intelligent Systems developed titles. The visuals have a softness to them, and all the character art has been given that WayForward look that is present in all of their games. WayForward has very talented artists, but visual fatigue is a real thing. Another concern is the sense of speed has been lost in translation. Actions in Reboot Camp are slower as the combat animations have had their runtime extended by several seconds. I prefer my strategy games to be swift-paced and snappy like the Game Boy Advance original. It appears that when they blew up the game to a home console scale, they also blew up the length of the animations to go along with it. None of this is a killjoy, but it isn't doing much to endear me to the early game. I'm concerned about boredom becoming an issue, but I'm hoping that will not be the case once I get out of the early chapters. I intend to keep playing for now, and with any luck it will grow on me. Expect me to keep mentioning this over the coming months. Treasures of the Aegean. One of the perks of compulsively seeking any game which looks remotely interesting is that you occasionally do find a game which shows great promise and potential in a very short amount of time. This is how it was for me when I discovered Treasures of the Aegean. Despite first impressions, Treasures of the Aegean isn't actually a Metroidvania. It is an open-level platformer designed around solving interconnected puzzles to discover why an ancient civilization has been lost to time. Right off the bat I was run over by the traversal system. It's a parkour platformer, and great consideration has gone into how the player can interact with the environment. Movements flow into each other fluidly, running speed is impacted by slopes, and momentum affects your jumping distance and interaction with vines. The designers have taken care to make sure players can traverse quickly across the map, as the entire game is built around the time in which the player is racing against each time they play. Treasures of the Aegean story focuses on Maria, a parkour master who is researching the lost Minoan civilization. After a volcanic eruption causes an island to appear off the Greek coast, Maria drops onto the island to seek treasures and see if she can discover why the Minoans disappeared. This setup ties into the game's time loop mechanic. Each day plays out in a 15-minute window where the player has to explore and uncover as much of the island as possible before the volcano erupts once more. Unlike the eruption which rose the island from the sea, however, this eruption will cause the end of the world. Each time this happens, the time loop starts anew, with the island and timeline altering with each new day. Day 1 is peaceful, with Maria being allowed to work alone and unhindered. From day 2 onwards, however, the timeline will experience new events, such as the arrival of enemy mercenaries and a complete change to the island's layout. It's a very intriguing setup that makes me want to know what the game is going to do next. The daily time limit is a feature which will not be to everyone's taste, but I personally like it. I enjoy the sense of urgency it brings and have felt a notable level of tension when I see my timer was running out. It may be a time loop, but that doesn't mean all your progress is wiped. Your map is updated after each day, and all treasures and clues you have found are retained in your notes. It's clear that everything featured in Treasures of the Aegean has been thought out and has its place. There is no death, but the player will lose time whenever Maria is shot or injured, and from what I can tell, collecting relics and treasures will extend your timer, allowing you to get more done on each day. Based on all I have said, you wouldn't think I only played 2 hours of Treasures of the Aegean, but it really does speak to the strength of those first 2 hours. I'm looking forward to see where it goes next. So, that is my backlog progress for the months of May and June. I haven't been playing many games outside of the backlog, but I will give a quick honourable mention to a handful of classic arcade games I've been playing when I want to chill out. Arcade Archives, Tetris, the Grandmaster. Tetris doesn't need any introduction, but it really is quite staggering how many different versions of Tetris have existed over the years. People are most familiar with Nintendo's efforts, but there have also been versions made by Sega, Jaleco, Blue Planet Software, Atari, Hudson, Enhance, and so on. There are many versions of Tetris and they all have subtle characteristics that differentiate them from each other. It's why you can never have too many versions of Tetris. One version of Tetris I have not been able to get enough of since discovering it is Tetris the Grandmaster. Tetris the Grandmaster is definitely one of the more challenging versions of Tetris out there. Piece holding had not been introduced yet, rotation uses a different spin rule to modern Tetris, instant drop is not available, and piece locking happens almost immediately so you cannot use stalling tactics. This environment makes for a version of Tetris which forces you to play things straight with no shortcuts or tricks to help curtail the challenge. The play level increases each time you lock in a Tetramino, causing the game speed to shoot up much faster than it does in other versions. I love this version of Tetris and it will always be my first choice when I want to kill an evening playing arcade games. I'm still a long way off ever getting a Grandmaster rank. If I do make any gains, you'll be sure to hear about them in future videos. ACA Neo Geo Big Tournament Golf. Also known as Neo Turf Masters, Big Tournament Golf is SNK's premier sports game for the Neo Geo. There were many sports games developed for the Neo Geo hardware, but ask any Neo Geo fan and most will tell you that Big Tournament Golf is by far the best, and it is easy to see why. Presentation wise, the rotoscoped animations are hella smooth, and the music makes you pumped and calm in equal measure as you have to quickly and accurately place your drives across the course and make your handicap as low as possible. The live system is unforgiving and you need to constantly hit a birdie or better if you want your credits to go far. Like the best golf titles, Big Tournament Golf is infuriating and satisfying in equal measure. Easily one of my favourite Neo Geo games. Baraduke is a fairly obscure Namco arcade game from 1985 where the player has to fly around shooting alien spawners until there are none left. There are many things that amuse me about this game, but the main ones are the friendly aliens saying, the absolutely wild sound balancing where everything is either too quiet or too loud, the gameplay itself where you are constantly fighting not to get overwhelmed by newly spawned aliens, and best of all, the Pac-Man looking monsters that sometimes spawn out of the item boxes, making this one of the first video game jump scares. I can't help but smile every time one of those ugly bastards spawn. Here's a fun bit of trivia for you. The protagonist of Baraduke is the ex-wife of Dig Dug and the mother of Mr. Driller. I can't think of any company other than Namco who would pair up their mascots as marriage partners. Baraduke is basic, but it's the kind of basic, light-hearted, earnestly wacky arcade title that I am drawn to. It's worth a go. And that is it for the months of May and June. We've managed to make some dent in the backlog, but we still have a long way to go. Fortunately, I've already made a strong start to June, so expect a good update in the next video. That's all for now. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a pleasant summer. See ya.